On today's video, we're going to do a chocolate sorbet face-off, Gelato Messina versus David Lebovitz. David Lebovitz chocolate sorbet is kind of world famous in ice cream circles. It was the first time a recipe such as that was put into the public circle and was available. And since then, everybody's tried to make a copy of it. And, you know, just by changing one ingredient by like 10 grams doesn't make it the recipe yours. So today we're going to make both. We're going to make both Gelato Messina from Australia and David Lebovitz from the US. We're going to make them both traditionally. So in a churn machine, both of these would work brilliantly in Ninja Creamies, because the Ninja Creamy makes almost perfect sorbet of all types. You're going to hear the oven click on and off because I'm making creme brulee in there. But for now, let's look at what we need for each recipe. So for the Gelato Messina chocolate sorbet, you're going to need 650 grams of water, 200 grams of sugar, 60 grams of dextrose, 25 grams of malted dextrin, 5 grams of stabilizer, and 60 grams of cocoa powder. For David Lebovitz chocolate sorbet, you're going to need 555 grams of water, 200 grams of sugar, 75 grams of cocoa powder, 2 grams of salt, 170 grams of dark chocolate, 3 grams of vanilla extract. So to note, there's no stabilizer in David Lebovitz recipe. I'm going to keep it that way. These aren't my recipes. Let's keep them as they're meant to be and compare the results. So let's get everything ready and weighed up for both these recipes. 650 grams of water, 200 grams of sugar. For Gelato Messina's recipe, the method is slightly different. So what we're going to do is we need to heat the water up to 40 degrees centigrade. So let's get that on the hob now and get that warming up. Because what it says is to warm the water up and then add the dry ingredients at that temperature. And that's to get the cocoa powder to dissolve nice and quick. Cocoa powder breaks down into smaller particles. It doesn't dissolve. Those cocoa particles just dissipate throughout the liquid, but it does that above 40 degrees centigrade. It does it much better around 50-55 degrees centigrade, but 40 is what the recipe says. So in here we're going to get 200 grams of sugar, 60 grams of dextrose, 25 grams of malted dextrin. Don't worry if you haven't got these ingredients. We're going to talk about them a bit later. 25 grams. 5 grams of stabilizer. Whoa. Let's use... That is a lot of stabilizer. 5 grams. Tarragon. I don't know if I said that. And finally, 60 grams of cocoa powder. Let's give everything a fighting chance. We're going to use Valrhona here. There we go. Made a triumphant mess. And we are now going to stir those together. And that is our Gelato Messina ready. We're going to wait for this water to come to 40 degrees and then we'll add it together, which it happens to be, which is handy. So 40 degree water, we are meant to add in our powder, right? It's completely mixed. The sugar is already dissolved straight into that 40 degree water. Everything kind of just went. So now this goes back on the hob and we heat this up to 85 centigrade, so 185F. Super dark. Consistency is, it's pretty thick. Not gonna lie, at this stage it's pretty thick stuff. Now something else that the instructions say is before you churn, if it's too thick, then you need to agitate it, either whisk it together or put it in a blender or whatever. So the likelihood is they know that this is a thick base. So that aside, let's quickly tidy this up and get on to the second one. So we're just going to put that one there. I want to compare the color of the two before they go and chill down. So what do we need for David Lebovitz? 550 grams of water. 555 actually. 200 grams of sugar. All right, so the method for David Lebovitz is totally different. So let's just, it says we need to whisk first 375 mils of the water. So 375, it's 180 off. So we've got 375 grams of our water in here, and we need to mix this with sugar, which is 200 grams, cocoa powder, which is 75 grams, and salt. Pink Himalayan salt, that is. And we need to bring this to a boil. And we need to boil it whilst whisking for 45 seconds. So let's combine it here. Now that that's combined, let's get that on a hob, get it boiling. Let's weigh our chocolate. 170 grams of dark chocolate. This is 60%. Hello. 170 grams. So there's the chocolate, and then obviously we've got our water. We need some vanilla extract. Vanilla extract. 45 seconds of boiling. This is similar to making my chocolate fudge. Now, if you've made any of my chocolate fudge recipes, this is basically how I make it, but with different ingredients. You superheat, and in that case, boil the chocolate to really push those cocoa flavors forward. So we've done that. Now it says to add in our chocolate and stir until that's melted. That took less than 1 minute. Then we need to add our vanilla extract, which is 3 grams. And then finally, the remaining 180 grams of water. There's a lot of methods in David Lebovitz recipes that you can transfer to other recipes like this. Using that cold water to cool down this mix from boiling is a great way to do it. You can also do this with cream. I make many ice creams that I use the cream to bring the temperature down really nice and fast. You don't need to superheat the cream. It helps to denature the proteins in the cream somewhat, depending on the recipe, but it's a great way. Most people wouldn't know that you've heated the cream or not. So only once you get into the science of ice cream and the intricacies of the flavors that denaturing the protein starts to make a bit of a difference. It's not as thick as Gelato Messina's. Are we going to get it in there? Maybe. You know me. All right. Colour's the same. Obviously, Valrhona, very dark cocoa powder. Excellent cocoa powder. One of the best. I don't think it is the best. I think it is one of the best. For me, there are 4 or 5 cocoa powders that are head and shoulders above others. But I'll do a top 5 cocoa powder video one day. So let's get these chilled down and then we can churn them up. So first one to come out of the fridge is Gelato Messina, super thick base. It's kind of like pudding actually texture, so it really needs to be mixed up together before you put it in your machine. It may even be too thick for some of the lower cost home machines. Anyway, churned, we're going to put this one in this cream tub, so remember that for later on. I'll make sure that we talk about which one it is during the eating phase. And the next one is David Lebovitz. It's a much more traditional kind of consistency and viscosity. If anything, actually, it's a little bit thin, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. So in the machine that goes, we're going to churn this, exactly the same situation. And this one's going to go in this blue tub. And then we're going to get all of these in the freezer to harden off for, I think, probably 12 hours. So here we are. We're going to scoop up the Gelato Messina one first, breaking apart when it's being scooped up, which is not a good start. And it's got some kind of weird textural issues going on. And onto David Lebovitz, and it scoops much more traditionally. It's got a really nice kind of glossy finish, much more even finish, and it looks much more like a traditional chocolate sorbet, or to be fair, any sorbet should look. So now let's try them and see what they're like. So there we go. Gelato Messina versus David Lebovitz. Something to note in that scoop is the Gelato Messina had a really dry scoop. It had a very strange scooping texture. David Lebovitz had a much more traditional scooping texture. So let's see what they taste like. They look quite similar, although, yeah, let's look. The Gelato Messina one just breaks apart. It's hard. It's icy, which is weird because at the same time it's overstabilized. You can ignore the iciness because this is sorbet, remember. So the flavor's nice. You know, we've used Valrhona cocoa powder. And that's all that's in there. In here, we've got the David Lebovitz one, which scooped much more traditionally. It kept together and it wasn't dry. It spoons like it should do. Much less ice, or much smaller ice crystals, I should say. And the taste is a very much more rounded taste. So you've got the taste of that chocolate come through, as well as the cocoa powder. Hands down, David Lebovitz chocolate sorbet is the winner. It's just the breaking apart of this, which means that there's issues with the solids content, the amount of water. 1 kilo of sorbet is 5 grams of stabilizer, just insane. And that's just to account for the lack of solids. That's what the maltodextrin is for in the Gelato Messina recipe. Maltodextrin, kind of think of that as a low sweetness sugar. It's manufactured during the starch production process. So part of that whole carbohydrate family. And you use maltodextrin to boost solids content and give you a better mouthfeel. But this recipe is lacking so much that it is just not enough to get it to the finish line. Whereas David Lebovitz is a much more rounded recipe with the physical chocolate in there, which is obviously boosting the solids, but it's also increasing the fat, so it's giving you a better mouthfeel. That gives it a better texture, better scooping and serving texture, and overall just a much better chocolate sorbet. So US wins by quite a margin too. Gelato Messina, I think they're great. Their social media is good. Their flavor names are great. Obviously, these are just recipes that are done in recipe books. And something to remember is those recipes are not what they serve in their stores. So this is a book-based recipe comparison rather than anything else, because David Lebovitz doesn't have any scoop shops. But that aside, if you're going to make a chocolate sorbet, use David Lebovitz recipe as opposed to Gelato Messina's recipe. I'm going to do lots more comparison videos, and I'm also going to start picking holes in other people's recipes online, because I'm getting people send me recipes asking why they don't work, and they're straight from TikTok, and I'm not surprised they don't work. So we're going to start looking at those as well. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.